Along the many years of Don't Starve's existence, it has had a few interesting crossovers, some of which are obvious and everyone knows plenty about, and some are less obvious, so today we're going to talk about every single crossover that I could find, including one-sided ones where Don't Starve didn't receive anything in return. We will also be ranking them at the end of the video, so stick around to see my opinion on them. Oh yeah, shout out to this comment right here, by the way, because they gave me this idea. Thank you. Let's start simply with the obvious one. Fortnite. Wrong script. The Terraria crossover. This was the biggest and most influential crossover for the game, and without it, Don't Starve Together may have taken another direction entirely. The crossover occurred on November 18th, 2021, and brought a plethora of items to both games from each universe. Though Terraria got way more in the form of items from the crossover, Clay benefited more popularity-wise, since Terraria was, and still kind of is, considerably more popular than Don't Starve. So what exactly did Don't Starve receive from this crossover? 2 new bosses, the Eye of Terror and the Twins, which came with their own new respective fun drops, the Eye Mask and the Shield of Super Scariness, which name I totally forgot and I'm too lazy to look up, a new pet, and a handful of skins. Something you may not know is that this crossover is also responsible for Bunny Stew and Frozen Banana Daiquiri being in the game as well, as they are originally Terraria items, or foods. What did Terraria get? A lot. A brand new world gen option that quite literally brings most of the mechanics from Don't Starve over to Terraria, including a hunger meter as well as lethal darkness, and a new color filter. Deerclops was the boss Terraria chose to incorporate, and oh yeah, fun fact, apparently Deerclops came from Terraria according to Google, so that's a whole thing. And they got tons, and I mean tons of cosmetic and other niche little additions. You have Lucy, Abigail's flower, and Abigail, new hairstyles and outfits to match the characters we know and love, Chester, new paintings, monster lasagna, and even, get this,
Froggle Bunwich. God, I love Froggle Bunwich.
Okay. Anyways, now that we got the cold hard facts out of the way about this crossover, let's talk a little bit more technical here, and talk about a fun few bits of trivia that you may not know. First up, you may notice that the Eye of Cthulhu had its name changed, while the Twins did not. Nor did Deerclops have their name changed in Terraria. So what's wrong with the name Cthulhu in the Constant? Was a Clay dev anti-Lovecraft or something? Well, thanks to a comment I received after ranting about it in one of my live streams, I did a little deep diving, and it seems like Clay really didn't want the crossover to mess with the timeline of the lore, since Don't Starve takes place before Lovecraft wrote The Call of Cthulhu, a book that brought the entire idea of Cthulhu to light. If you don't know, Don't Starve takes place in the early 1920s. The Call of Cthulhu was published in 1928. Too late for any of our characters to read it and understand. Clay even cared so much about keeping their lore intact that they even revealed the character Wartox's ability to not only soul hop within the Constant, but also soul hop outside, implying that Wartox is the entire reason Terraria made its way over to the Constant. Fun, right? Okay, Clay, if you really care about keeping your timelines right, then explain this. Jokes aside, Clay did a great job of implementing this crossover. Before we move on to my thoughts on the crossover, let's first talk about what I meant by this being the most influential crossover to all of Don't Starve. To understand that, we first have to understand Don't Starve's evolution. Sure, it was already on the path of becoming a more survival sandbox game rather than a survival roguelike game, with its jump to Don't Starve Together, with easier revives, more fleshed out progression systems, and of course, less map RNG. But I think Clay was heavily inspired by Terraria even before the crossover. Think of it. We have a moon-based boss, much like Terraria, a hard mode in the form of rifts, much like Terraria, equipped with their own twisted light biome and stereotypical dark biome, like the Hollow and Crimson/Corrupted from Terraria, and much like Terraria, there is a general flowchart when it comes to boss progression, with many optional bosses tacked on as well. Look, I'm not saying Clay copied Terraria or anything with its update lines. Like I said, they just seemed heavily inspired based on the, well, obvious similar themes, which is totally fine. Truly unique concepts are rare in video game media, and Clay already hit their uniqueness of Don't Starve with the whole 2.5D model, its incredibly unique lore, as well as the survival element never seen before, which was sanity. Speaking of sanity, I have a fun redesign idea about this mechanic coming soon in video form, as well as an ocean content redesign idea, so if you don't want to miss when those are out, make sure to subscribe. And leave a like if you could too, that'd be awesome. And while I feel we as Don't Starve players received way less from the crossover, it brought a huge amount of players from the Terraria scene over to Don't Starve, some of which stuck around. An absolute W for Clay, which in turn is an absolute W for us as Clay product enjoyers. An amazing crossover, easily S tier, starting us off really strong. Next up, let's talk about another one that's very near and dear to my heart. Yeah, it's the gambling one. This was the most recent crossover that actually used to be one-sided. Don't Starve characters were in Balatro long before Jimbo made his way to the Constant. About 4 months before Jimbo came to the Don't Starve world, Balatro received the Friends of Jimbo 3 update, which brought a few games into the world of virtual poker. Most notably, however, it brought our cast of characters as marketable cards. You love to see it. Fast forward a few months and Clay finally collected on their side of the crossover, adding the brand new Jimbo machine where you can gamble, though not really since it doesn't cost anything. Can it be classified as gambling if it doesn't cost anything? I don't actually know. Either way, you can play poker for free, but sometimes you get punished. And sometimes you get riches. All of our friends became jokers that have fun little effects, and as a bonus, Clay added playing cards, which can be used to play any card game you wish. It was an incredibly small update, but it added more stuff to do, and as a chronic shipwrecked enjoyer for reasons, can I really put this crossover anywhere except S tier? Come on. As a word of warning, for any new players out there, this machine is a trap and you will very easily see yourself playing until winter and forget that you were playing Don't Starve. Oh god, where did the time go? Alright, let's talk about another pretty massive crossover that introduced a whole lot to the other game and a whole little to Don't Starve. Cult of the Lamb. On August 21st, 2023, Cult of the Lamb and Don't Starve's universes merged. And much like the Terraria update, this was very weighted towards throwing Don't Starve assets into another game. More specifically, they just kind of got like an entire character. Yeah, let's talk about that. First, let's talk about what Don't Starve received. Go fishing in the Oasis during summer, and sometimes you just may fish up a red crown. Give said crown to the nearby antlion, and you will receive 4 blueprints. There you go. That's the content. That's the crossover. I wish I was joking. Don't Starve received a whopping 4 in-game items, 2 of which are flooring, and 1 of which is an item to trade for, leaving us with only the Lamb idol, which is fine, I guess. It's a fire with a positive sanity aura, and it can be upgraded, but yeah. Of course, there were a ton of skins as well, but is that enough to make up for the massive content gap? Well, let's look at what Cult of the Lamb received for this crossover. Weber. That's right. Weber Don't Starve is actually Weber Cult of the Lamb now. He's unlocked in a very similar fashion to how he was unlocked in Reign of Giants back in ye olden days of Don't Starve, by finding his skull on a dead spider and burying it in a grave. Cult of the Lamb also received a ton of new decorative structures that take the shape of familiar Don't Starve objects, like the alchemy engine and science machine, as well as an entire new game mode, that being Penitence mode, which adds a sleep and hunger bar to the game. Sleep not being required in Don't Starve, of course, and hopefully never, because god, that would be annoying. I already find it annoying in games like Project Zomboid, but it's still an homage to the survival experience you would find in Don't Starve. And it came out in the same update, so we're counting it as part of the crossover. Now that we got the facts out of the way for both games, let's talk about some technical stuff. First off, the crossover actually benefited Cult of the Lamb more, at least in raw Steam player count. Though that makes sense as Don't Starve Together is, and was, more popular than Cult of the Lamb. But out of all of their update lines, the crossover one was by far the worst. One would be curious why Clay even did this crossover, especially because they planned to add so little to their game. But hey, I'm sure they had their reasons, and not every company is looking to make just some extra bucks. That being said, however, all of the points I'll be giving this crossover goes to the Cult of the Lamb devs, because they seem to, care more about it. At least actual gameplay-wise. I guess I'm being a little too harsh though, since most crossovers in most games are skin only, and not actual game things. But, I don't know. At least Terraria's crossover came with more than a simple fetch quest. I guess I'll say B tier. I don't wanna, but I have to admit, compared to some of these other crossovers, there was definitely more effort involved. So that right there was the big 3 crossovers out of the way, and those are the only crossovers to my knowledge that actually provided content to Don't Starve. Together. The rest of these were purely one-sided, though this next one had assets that never got introduced to the game. That's right, I am of course talking about the Team Fortress 2 crossover. This crossover is really old, like Don't Starve single-player vanilla pre-Reign of Giants old. Whoa, not that old, but still like really old. This crossover was one-sided in official content. However, Clay did create models for their side, they just never implemented them. Let's talk about that. First up, what did Clay have planned for this crossover? Ironically, for one crossover they didn't implement, they had a lot of stuff prepared for it. An entire character, who would be named Wyro, based off of the Pyro from Team Fortress 2, if that wasn't obvious, who would have his own starting gear including a flare gun, an axe extinguisher, and his own special balloon chester. This character was actually really fleshed out. In the game's files, he apparently had his own set of color cubes for being insane, and even had his own sound files. Not only that, but Wyro paved the way for the shooting animations that we received with Wheeler in her addition to Hamlet, years after this crossover was released. Of course, Wyro never actually came to the game, but what did Team Fortress 2 add from this unfortunately one-sided crossover? The Hambat, which was renamed to the Hamshank, and the Wilson Weave. This crossover was still most likely a huge W for Clay though, as Team Fortress 2 was and I mean way more popular at the time. But could you imagine if Wyro was canon in the Constant? It would have been so funny. It's a shame that he's now canonically dead. Rip Wyro. Due to the effort that Clay put into this crossover, I have to at least give it D tier. Unfortunately, it was sort of a nothing burger in both games. Next, here we have our first proper one-sided crossover that you may not know about. Little Big Planet 3.
You can also get jiggy and shake your...
Yeah, that's right. Little Big Planet 3 introduced a plethora of Don't Starve assets, including tons of items and some new costumes including Chester, a spider, Mr. Don't Starve himself, Wilson, a pigman, Willow, and of course, a tall bird. The next few games I couldn't really tell if they were official crossovers for promotional reasons or genuine references, so I won't actually be ranking them since they are really tiny. But they were interesting enough to add to this video, and you guys know I like to be thorough and have a perfect track record of not missing stuff. Anyways, next on our list, did you know that Don't Starve is referenced in The Binding of Isaac? Not the main game, but a different version called Four Souls, which is a board game that has a surprisingly complex website that you can navigate. Anyways, one of the monster decks that could be unlocked by completing the Lake of Fire social goal during its Kickstarter phase was called straight up Don't Starve, and it had a very similar looking cast in a familiar art style. This card has interesting effects as well. Each player may discard a loot card, and if they don't, they will take 1 damage. Repeat this process until there are 1 or fewer living players. Essentially, this card wanted to take your valuables, which is on theme for the Constant, and Don't Starve as a whole. Overall, this is a really cool reference, though I'm assuming they had, some crossover stuff going on here because those are just straight up ripped characters from Don't Starve. So I would assume it's more of an actual weird collaboration rather than a reference, since references are generally, references, not the full characters. Okay, I'm rambling way too long on this segment. It's a collaboration thing. I couldn't find any collaboration. Move on, me. And finally, this one is probably actually a reference since this game has tons, and I mean tons of references to other media, a game called The Wardrobe, which was an Italian point-and-click game that came out in 2017. It had some painfully familiar faces in its morgue segment. Unsurprisingly, however, the entire game was based on references to other media, But it's cool that they included Don't Starve, especially because in 2017 it wasn't exactly trending. Wait, I almost forgot one. In true Polarlotus fashion, there is also a game called Wizard with a Gun that added a few Don't Starve skins, including a spider hat, a beefalo outfit, as well as a Deerclops outfit. Now this one was an official crossover, albeit one-sided much like the Little Big Planet 3 one, so it won't be getting a ranking, but it was cool to talk about and add, and I almost forgot it, so I'm glad I didn't. And there is one TV show that references Don't Starve, or rather just has it playing in the actual show. Resident Alien, Season 2, Episode 15, labeled Best of Enemies, shows the characters actually playing the game Don't Starve. There are a few things I didn't talk about, like Clay's own crossovers with themselves via like Hot Lava, their other game, but in-universe crossovers are kind of, well, expected and obvious. I also only covered official media, which meant many of the fan-made or unofficial stuff was left out, including pure references that weren't actually official crossovers, because that would have made this video 10 hours long, and I value your guys' time. If I missed any really obscure crossovers, please let me know in the comments down below. And hey, while you're down there, go ahead and tell me what crossover you would like to see next in Don't Starve, along with leaving a like and subscribing if you aren't already. Have a great day/night, everybody.